Okay, hello everyone. I'm very happy to have Alice and Nick with me for what I think will be a very interesting webinar.
Hi.
You want to say hi?
Hello, lovely to be here.
So please say hi in the chat. Here we go. We've got Jane, Loretta, James, Dinah. Hi, Dinah.
She's just,
yeah. Oh, Alex, Diana. Yeah, great. It's lovely to have some familiar names in the chat. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this topic. I did do a workshop. I was saying to Nick and Alice, I did a workshop in Switzerland, I think it was, a few years ago on this very topic. So I'm kind of interested to see what they come up with and see if I can contribute anything or any ideas. So shall we start? Do you get the slides up? I'll put the slides up. We have got a copy of the slides to send to you as well as a PDF. So we'll share that with you later on in the webinar. So here we go. So over to you.
Okay. Well, we put together some thoughts. We realised there are possibly more questions than there are answers. But hey, so I shall proceed. Well, so actually, I should just say, I mean, I don't know how many people know me, so I'm going to actually go back slightly and say I'm Alice Whieldon, and Seiki is what I offer in the world, mostly do workshops, and non-doing is, I suppose, something I do talk about, but since I've been talking about this and writing about it with Nick, I'm thinking maybe I shouldn't say non-doing quite so much, because it actually it's maybe a tricky thing, but that's what we're going to talk about. Nick,
let me just say hello to folks, and yes, I'm Nick Pohl, and my special interest is in mixing clean language with shiatsu, seiki, bodywork. And for me, clean language is a really beautiful fit with the principles of Zen, and we do call it Zen shiatsu. So part of what I'm interested here tonight, I guess, is, well, what is Zen exactly? How does it fit with language? How does it fit with touch? And what's the place of non-doing in that whole Zen tradition?
Fantastic. And hello, everyone. Annette, hello.
Yeah, I can see there's lots of people in the chat. They seem to know you. I think probably quite a lot of people do know who you are. But anyway, yeah.
They know who we are. Remarkable they're here at all. Non-doing, or otherwise known as Wu Wei, Chinese bit of things, although there's all sorts of other traditions use this. How did non-doing become cool? Because it is. I mean, in non-doing, you're starting to see it all over the place as we're going to approach whatever subject it is with non-doing. So it's become kind of, I've said, oddly fashionable, because I think it is quite odd, because it's the opposite of something. So how did the opposite of something become popular? What is it? Could this be a rather embarrassing misunderstanding of non-doing? This was my thought.
I blame mindfulness, Alice.
Yes.
I blame mindfulness. I mean, mindfulness is all the rage.
Absolutely. So of course, mindfulness perhaps is getting a little bit passé. So we move on to non-doing. And in workshops, I often hear, or at least see, people looking a bit worried, and the whole idea of non-doing, because surely clients are coming to us for something. They don't want us to do nothing. And I think people have got a point. What do we mean? And how could this be useful? So we've put our heads together and think, well, what does it mean? And how could non-doing be relevant to touch work?
Right. Okay.
I'd just say for my mindfulness, it would be nice just to hear in the chat what people identify non-doing as. Keep the chat going, folks. Put anything you want in, questions, comments. This is meant to be a good conversation. say mindfulness principles. The principles of mindfulness is, yeah, you're just sitting, you're allowing things to come to you. There are various things you can do in mindfulness. You can be compassionate, you can turn towards uncomfortable things, but there's, I guess, what people might think of as non-doing in mindfulness is that you're, as I say, just sitting, and thereby supposedly stilling the activity, or at least noticing the activity. We've got an exercise coming up just to explore that a bit. Yeah, over to you, Alice.
Yeah, thank you.
If you look in the chat, we've already got, Sue's already said, non-doing for me is allowing things to unfold. Carol says, lots is happening when doing nothing. That's an interesting thing in itself, isn't it? Non-doing is just being. That's something you hear a lot of, isn't it? Kim says that. Effortless action, says James. Not forcing work flowing. You hear that a lot. Present in the moment. Non-doing is taking a nap, says Kim.
And Jill, thank you. Non-doing is holding the space. Yeah, lovely, fantastic. My suspicion when I started thinking is that non-doing is often a way we describe a kind of doing. So I had this suspicion that there's a kind of contradiction going on somewhere in there, which I thought I would set out to have a little look at. Very good idea. Yeah.
And Alice is a philosopher as well as other things, so we've got a bit of a philosophical take on this to start you off with.
Slightly. It's a long time ago. I'm not sure if I can really be called a philosopher anymore, but there's some really nice comments coming up. Non-intention, intention of not interfering. Oh, lots there about the Alexander technique. Very great. And I just wanted to note that it's not just the East when we talk about Wu Wei on non-doing. And I found some possibly slightly questionable quotes here. Here we have Carl Rogers, who Masanaga really liked. Carl Rogers drew a lot on Carl Rogers in trying to describe shiatsu. In fact, early on, he was considering at one point using Carl Rogers, in particular, Western psychology and psychoanalytic theory as a way for the shiatsu theory. We could have ended up not with meridian shiatsu, but with Rogerian shiatsu. Yeah. Entirely possible, and he incorporated quite a few of those ideas in his theories of shiatsu. So he says, here's a quote from Carl Rogers, says, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. And he applies that to other people, accepting other people. Now, I question here whether that's really non-doing, but there's something of non-doing or going towards that there for me.
Well, there's...
I remember a book that Carl Rogers' book about the self, where he has a thing that I use in my teacher training thing, which is person-centered teacher, student-centered teaching, which is where it came from. And I remember a very famous chapter in that book where he describes where he goes in to teach a I don't know if you read it, a workshop in the university, and he literally didn't do anything. He literally just sat there and allowed the whole group to get really angry at him because he wasn't doing anything. And then they all went off. Eventually, they all got together and went off and researched the entire subject and taught each other how to do it. So I can see that's where he was kind of coming from there. That thing of just creating a facilitation by just being himself, you know what I mean? And not actually actively participating.
Yes, and then we've got the slightly paradoxical for me feeling that turns into a technique all of its own, which is a doing of a...
Exactly, it did. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Lee has got a comment. Non-doing, not interfering with the flow movement of the Tao. Yes, definitely. If you get back to the Tao, you're probably doing the right thing here, or not doing it. And the original character for Wei apparently has the radical for female monkey. And there, of course, we get that phrase monkey mind, I guess, that is so common in mindfulness. The doing, the constant doing. which is so that another mindfulness thing, ironically, considering its name, is moving away from the mind into the body, an embodied sense of presence rather than.
I think I'm going to have to download this chat. Actually, you could write a book
great.
just from it. I mean, there's something coming in here.
I think we should hand over. But
yes, we should all just not do anything for the next hour.
Rose, put your finger on it. Not acting on the basis of learned behavior and socially induced desire. In other words, coming back to something natural, something more like the Tao. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting. I'm so slightly distracted now reading that. Anyway, and I've of course had to include something from the Tao Te Ching. Practice non-doing, and everything will fall into place. And quite a bit further on, do you have the patience to wait till your mud settles? I thought it was mine, but it's mud settles and the water is clear. Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? So that's from the sort of master of non-doing. George Fox, I just thought I'd include that. George Fox is the founder of Quakers in the 17th century. That's right. And I just found a quote from him which I rather liked. If you do anything in your own wills, you tempt God, but stand still in that power that brings peace. A little bit of, probably needs a bit of unpacking for the theology there, but for me that's something of the stillness. And in Quakerism, you are still and quiet to let the spirit speak. Actually, let God speak.
One other source there. I was talking to Jill Hall recently about this, and Jill, I think you're on here somewhere, mentioning the Arnold Mendel's process work. So this idea that each problem contains its own solution, if only you allow the problem to unfold, is probably a key thing in what most people think of as non-doing. And that process work is rooted in Jungian psychology, quantum physics, and Taoism.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to a little bit of a poll. I think some of you are kind of answering some of these questions already. Clearly the Tao is up there, and people have been reading that. So Cliff's going to, I think...
I'm going to launch these polls. We've got three. We've got, have you read Masanaga Zen Shiatsu, yes or no? That's a yes or no answer. I'll just share that now. So if you'd like to vote on that, we'll just see how we're getting on.
We were just wondering when I wrote these questions, what are people's backgrounds? Because I've come across a lot of shiatsu people these days who haven't necessarily read Masanaga. Times change. Well,
look, there we go. Look, we've got a third of the group basically haven't even read Zen Shiatsu, which is, for my generation,
it's unheard of.
Well, this isn't a test. We just wanted to be sure.
There weren't that many books. There were only two.
Exactly. But it's not a test. We just want to be sure, if we're using references, how many people are familiar with the references. So if you're not, then just put it in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so should we run the second poll?
Yeah.
Let's see how many people have read the Tao Te Ching. Have you read the Tao Te Ching? Let's see, we'll run that and see.
Very good. I really recommend Stephen Mitchell's translation of it. It's very much, it's quite lyrical. You've got...
He takes some liberties, but it's a very good translation.
It's a digestible translation.
Yeah.
So
even more, a larger proportion haven't read the Tao Te Ching. We're nearly up to half and half there, like 54% and 46%.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this is the third poll. How confident do you feel in explaining non-doing as it relates to your work? So if someone asked you that, how confident would you feel in explaining it? Maybe we should do this before and after the webinar and see whether this means. Okay, I'm going to share this now. So you're very confident, unconfident, or very unconfident in explaining non-doing as it relates to your work?
So good, nice.
Over half vote as confident. It could be a self-selecting group, actually, because people who are interested in this whole topic, and they probably, judging by the chat, I think group should be here presenting. You know what I mean? They've got some really good ideas and really obviously thought a great deal of
Absolutely. I'm really delighted, because that was one of our aims, is that the chat should do more than the presenters. And it really is.
Yes. It crossed my mind, Nick, which would mean I think we should download it, and like Pat says, we'll download it and we'll send it in some kind of form to everyone, which is the first time we've done that, but I think it's in this particular webinar would be a really good idea. Yeah,
so if people have got resources that they want to point people to, put them in the chat. It'd be great to share some resources on this. There's actually a great book I didn't put in here called Non-Doing by Itsuo Tsuda, who he lived in France. He was Japanese, and Seitai movement. It's worth a read. It's a little bit old-fashioned in some ways, but worth a read. Okay, good. I wondered, I didn't put it in here, but we wondered, do people know why Zen Shiatsu is called Zen Shiatsu? I wonder. Kishi told me about that. It wasn't Masunaga's name for it. In fact, it was Ahashi who called it Zen Shiatsu, partly because Ahashi translated it. Masunaga wrote it. It was one of Masunaga's more minor books, in fact, by Masunaga's own reckoning. And Zen at the time in late 70s, when was it published? I can't remember. Zen was rather popular then, so it was partly Ahashi, who's a great salesman, and that was his thinking, it's going to sell. But it was also a nod to the feel of the book, the sense, the teaching about being in the moment, and Ahashi's interpretation of that. Masunaga himself wasn't too hot on the title, but
the ironic thing is he was very into Zen.
Yes,
he was a meditator. He was into Buddhism.
He was a lay Buddhist. That's right. Exactly. It is in there. A lot of those principles are in that book. I must reread it. I usually reread it every 10 years. I think it's about time I read it again.
Me too. I was thinking that today.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Nick.
So I'm going to just bring in a tiny bit of clean language with this exercise, but essentially it's an embodied way of exploring everything we've just been talking about. And it's nothing you haven't done before. But let's see what happens in this context. The interesting thing is that this very simple exercise we've all done 1,000 times in our training, I found a source for it in the 13th century Zen master called Dogen, Japanese Zen master, who was the founder actually of the Soto Zen tradition, which is the same tradition that 700 years later Shunryu Suzuki brought to California, to San Francisco. And it's just worth remembering, 700 years. This stuff that we're doing has been going on and on and on for hundreds of years. And we're doing it now. And people will be doing it in 500 years from now. But so just sort of taking advantage of that spotlight of the nowness of it. If you just get yourself comfortable, sitting on the floor, sitting in a chair. Sitting is probably better than standing for this. And just begin to sort of orient yourself to your sitting bones. And Dogen, in his manual on how to do Zazen meditation, has something he calls Sai Yu Yoshin. Sai means left, Yu means right, and Yoshin means swinging. So we're just going to very, very, very gently begin to explore, once you're comfortable, this sort of Zazen posture, if you want, if it's okay for you, which is essentially shoulders above hips, ears above shoulders. So you probably find your spine aligning itself slightly different way. And if that's not comfortable, it doesn't matter at all. Just find your sitting bones and get a sense of front and back, pubic bone, sacrum, coccyx. And begin to let your head relax, your mind become a little more still. No need to think about chat, no need to look at the screen. And sinking your attention gently down into the floor, the earth, the sense of your weight of your body, if that's okay. And then when you're ready, just swinging left and right. So just sort of begin to move either to the left or the right, whichever is better for you. Just a few millimeters, just a few millimeters. And then coming back through the center, just a few millimeters to the other side. And get into the swing of that. Very, very minute. If you were doing something here, it would almost be impossible to see that you were doing it. Very minute. But you can sense within yourself that something is moving between left and right. Maybe you want to tune your breathing to the movement as well. Just in breath in one direction, out breath in the other. Just take a little time to get your body into the swing of that, as if there's a rhythm that's right for you. And noticing what you notice, that there's different weight on your sitting bones. The sense of your spine maybe like a pendulum. Or maybe some sense that there is in the middle there some kind of center point. And if there is, then gradually allowing yourself to come to that center point, to find the place of stillness. And what's that like? Just notice what the stillness has to offer you. When you're in a point of stillness, where is the movement now? There's still a whole lot of things moving inside you, outside you, breath, heartbeat. In the stillness, just noticing what kind of movement you become aware of. So that when we're not deliberately doing anything, we can notice more easily all the doing that's going on naturally. And then when you're ready, just try it front and back, just a few millimeters in one direction, a few millimeters in the other. Hopefully your body is beginning to get the idea now and sort of happy to take over. Just allow the movement back and forth to feel like a natural sort of exploration, a pendulum happily swinging back and forth. Maybe tuning your breathing in to sync with the movement. And again, beginning to notice that maybe somewhere between back and forth is a still point. And coming to that point of rest. Just check left and right again if you want. In all four directions, is this actually the stillest point? And what's it like here? And just bringing in our clean language question, just to see if there's any kind of metaphor that comes for you. Just ask yourself, when I am like this, I'm like what? Or when I am like this, it's like what? And just be open to any answers that come as a word or a memory or an image or a song. When you're like this, you're like what? And just savor that. If something comes to you, savor it, be curious about it. Is there anything else about that image or metaphor? Just be curious about it for a minute. if nothing comes to you, just stay in your embodied sense of stillness or movement. And then when you're ready, if you do get something, of course, we would love to know in the chat what kind of thing comes up for you when you're in this kind of space of doing, non-doing. Yeah, just when you're ready to bring yourself back. Curious about your metaphor. Is there anything else about that metaphor? And yeah, if you got something, let's see what metaphorically might come up and how we represent this sort of continuum between doing and non-doing.
Mm. For me, Nick, it was just more of a space than anything. I felt a core, almost like a tube of space right the way down when we did
a tube of space.
Kind of space as well. It's very familiar through meditation practice, being in that.
Well, we got wow! I think the whole things are really pouring in here. Highland Cow Toffee, of course. There's the Highland Cow Toffee non-doing, well-known brand, full of sense of myself, flowing water, radiating perfume like a flower. Jar and a big bowl of warm white light. When I'm moving on a plant among other plants, not ones I know. Wow. Tranquil still pot. Pendulum clock. Yeah. Alice, did you notice anything? Or?
Oh, well, yeah, and actually, when I found a moment of stillness, oddly, not oddly at all, but then more movement started to come, but from a different place, not conscious movement, but spontaneous movement.
Which is, kind of a very familiar way for your body to respond to being listened to and giving space. Yeah. When I practiced this the other day, I got an image of, I was a cloud around the top of a mountain peak. So it was like, the mountain peak was very solid and very pointed at one point, but I was this cloud around it. And it was really interesting. Right. I've never had a metaphor like that before. And yes, Loretta, yikes, a real awareness of my uneven pelvic girdle. Could that be a judgment, Loretta? But just being with that unevenness, I guess, is what we're talking about. Internal space and light. After it's been snowing, yes. Exactly. Okay, lovely. Thanks, Kat. Okay, over to you, Alice.
Okay, I'm going to move on. It feels like we could do, a whole course on this. Well, I thought, from a logical point of view, for me that sometimes helps because we can't really talk about non-doing if we don't know what doing is. Maybe we just have a little thought about that. So doing is a verb; it's an act, and from my research, but also my own feeling, is that doing is really about giving meaning to anything and everything. It's judging the world and acting on that judgment. And I put here the 10,000 things of the Tao Te Ching, the world of opposites, in which once there is meaning, once there is me and the idea of me and you, then meaning just becomes, divisions come all around us and meaning is everywhere. And we see the world through this lens of giving meaning to it. This is this, not that, this, not that. And this is what this is dualistic thinking. Nothing, this is life.
It's not just meaning, it's meeting. Yes, bringing the ego in as the way to experience the world.
Yeah, there's not just the experience, which we can't even talk about. There's not just this one, but now I have an idea of myself. So there's some separation. And from that first separation, the separations multiply.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is doing, it's action of some kind, even if it's a subtle action of thought, not so subtle, because out of thought comes all action. So I've started with doing. Do feel free to comment or disagree. And Nick, you were,
yes, I just wanted to say, going back to the Tao Te Ching on that first chapter, that, you know, as it talks about the impossibility of talking about the thing that we're trying to talk about today.
It's always worth bearing in mind, isn't it? The Tao is not the eternal.
But coming on to what Alice is saying here, the quote is, naming is the origin of all things. Naming is the origin of all things. So once a thing has a name, it's a thing. And then you've got 10,000 things before you know it. And that's so it's so important to remember that we're working here with language. And once you get into the body, it's a completely different realm. So, for example, the word I and the word we separate points of awareness along a continuum of separateness and connection into being, or lonely separation. I and we are just words. And similarly, doing and non-doing are just words. And so I'm not sure if Alice agrees with me entirely on this, but you could think of them as points along a continuum. But we're also kind of looking in this webinar, is non-doing something completely different from how you think when you think about doing? Does that make sense, Alice?
It makes sense. Yeah. So I suppose my question in this whole thing is the way that we are talking about non-doing in touch work actually a kind of doing. That's kind of, so just reminding, coming back to what our focus started out as, is it actually just a form of doing that, fine, we can call it non-doing, but it's actually a kind of doing? Or are we really trying to reach towards something quite different? And if so, how is that relevant to the art of touch?
It's interesting you say that, because I actually did a bit of practical work on this today with one of my clients who may even be on this webinar, actually, because she mentioned it. She's got the email. Basically, I was doing a technique. I've done it twice now, where I've basically done as little as possible. Whether I'm still doing that, I'll have to get you to let me know, Alice. But I think you're right. I mean, there is a certain, I remember Pauline went through a phase of having a really nice system, I think in response to the whole thing that was happening in the shiatsu world, which was students, as you started out at the beginning of the webinar, were kind of confused about this thing. They wanted to be good shiatsu practitioners, and to be good shiatsu practitioners, they had to be terribly Zen-like, and therefore doing stuff wasn't very cool. So they wanted to do. But then you kind of get into a confused space of like, well, am I just not doing anything? But bring back to my client, what I was doing actually felt similar to what I've done with you, Nick, with clean language, and also with you with some of the Seiki things I've done with you, Alice, which was basically reducing the amount of action down to the absolute minimum that I was doing. And as a result, that created space for the client to actually, for things to happen. And that is very close to that experience was very close. We both kind of agreed that was very close to that quote that you made, that you quoted from Lao Tzu about basically letting things happen. The less you do, the more things happen.
Kat's got a quote here. A chat in the chat saying, allowing space for the client to do what they need. So that I don't know if you meant that, Kat, but
I think there's another stage, and I think there's another stage beyond that. I'm wondering whether that's where Alice is going with this, which is that actually there's an even bigger space where, if non-doing is a thing, it's actually in a bigger space beyond me doing things or me not doing things to my client so that their body can spontaneously do things. It's more creating an even bigger space where differentiation dissolves and where the universe itself is playing out itself. And can we say that the universe itself is doing things when things happen in the universe? That would be a question that that's a question where I feel it's kind of going. I don't know what.
I agree with you. You're jumping ahead of us here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I feel there's a room for part 2 of this discussion, because it really is. And Rose has put something very, way in Chinese is not just a verb, but state of being. She's absolutely right, Rose. This is immensely difficult to approach this whole topic. So the opposite of doing, what is the opposite of doing? Well, it's not nothing, as somebody stated further back there. It's not nothing. That is it's easy to think it's nothing, but nothing, doing and nothing are actually not related, really. It's a linguistic issue that we think that the opposite of doing must be nothing. See what I mean? So the opposite, the actual philosophical logic here to doing is negative doing. The sign here is with a negative sign, doing.
Okay.
You understand? So in a way, a word doesn't help us here. It's the actual opposite of doing, which you cannot describe in any way, because any description is doing.
That's what Nick was just saying.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely. We can't repeat it often enough, because
I'm getting somewhere.
It messes with your head, and it has to mess with your head, because the only way, of course, and I'm sure that most people listening to this know this very well, but I think we have to acknowledge this, that we have to let it mess with our head. We have to be comfortable with something that isn't all of this. Okay.
Yes.
So doing is not a verb. Not doing is not a verb. Doing is not a verb in some ways, but not doing is definitely not a verb. It's not an action. So to think that we can do a non-doing act is somewhat of getting ourselves in a twist.
Yeah. I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from. And it can trigger it's quite a serious problem sometimes, because it can actually lead to ineffective treatments, in my experience. I've done tutorials where people are almost paralyzed by the fear of doing something. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I've actually experienced that in tutorials.
Yeah. Oh, me too. I've experienced that very much on workshops, especially with Seiki, when it looks like not doing very much. It's actually not true but then you find people ending up doing nothing.
Yeah. That's it.
But we're actually needing skill, immense skill in touch. So there's a lot of doing. Anyway.
Yeah.
In the Stephen Mitchell translation of the Tao, he has a comment of his own. The greatest help, and I emphasize that help word, is wholeheartedly trusting people to solve their own problems. So the thing about students freezing because they don't know what to do, or they don't know if they should do anything, is about trusting your embodied self rather than your head. The greatest help you can give yourself there is trusting your embodied sense of what wants to happen here. Where do I touch, and what kind of touch? I think that's the point he's making there.
Yeah.
Alex has a question.
I'm not going to say it just in case I get ahead of the slides. So I'm going to wait till all the slides are over before I say anything else.
No, it's great. Thank you. Alex is saying is doing yang and non-doing yin.
Yes and no. Sorry, Alice. That was a trick that Zen masters often pulled on their students. They'd say, one student would ask a question, they'd say yes, and then another student would come 3 days later and ask the same question, they'd say no. So This is welcome to the world of Zen. Yeah.
But
also, koans, of course, are a very important tool.
Yeah.
For the duality involved in this whole debate. You know, they really are very useful for that.
Yeah, but it's tricky, isn't it? I remember many, many years ago, Ram Dass, who some of you have heard of, even he sounds a bit old-fashioned these days, or long gone, but my father said to him, he was visiting us, and he said to him, one day, yesterday you said this, and today you said that. You know, come on, which is it? And Ram Dass said, I'm inconsistent.
You could have just
My father has never forgotten that.
You could have just done this today.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. Oh, Alice, yeah.
Okay. So non-doing. How do we? Well, I'm really just reiterating what we've been saying. It starts to feel like an extended koan. You said a totally different mindset's called for. This is the famous Japanese swoosh. Some attempt. How do you talk about it? And many people have done a better job than I'm doing here. A still point in which there's no attachment to meaning, no desire. So there's things come up. It's not that there is nothing, but there's no attachment. There's movement, change. Things come up, things pass. Things come up, things pass.
Yeah.
Not fixed. Any comments on that?
I think what that question raises that for me is it's a bit like clean language, but as I'm connecting with the person, it's like what in me is responding to that? Is that a natural response, or is it some constructed part of me that is responding? You know, is that some fear I have of connecting with that, or is there just a completely natural response from me that knows what to do? In which case, am I getting in the way of that knowing by trying to censor it? You know, all of these little mind games. What in me is responding to that? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's part of it, definitely, yeah.
So I had a picture of my dog here because partly because I couldn't think of a picture, and I thought he's a really good one. Not doing anything. I think he's probably just not doing. He's just doing nothing there. But anyway, there you go. So I just want. We've only got a moment to do this, but let's see. I surrender work is what I've been calling Katsugen, the spontaneous movement lately, and this is a real practice of surrender. Well, this is a practice of surrender, which is why I call it surrender work. And in a sense, it's reaching towards one. It's letting yourself fall into non-doing, perhaps. So let's just see. Sit, close your eyes, however you are, wherever you are, and see what happens when you don't do. Can you not do for even a few seconds? I'm going to pause and not speak, and just for a very short period here, and I want you to surrender to the moment. So for me, it's rather tempting to stay there, but we're a little short of time. So I'm interested. I often find when we do this that to begin with, I mean, that was moments, possibly not even a minute. I find that it's very common that people have an initial trying to surrender and find themselves then, oh, but I must stop trying to surrender. So they then try to stop trying to surrender and trying to not do, and then find that there's doing and not doing. and in the end, there's this idea in Japanese culture, but universal. There's discipline, which the Zen would be, what we mostly think of Zen and Zazen, is the discipline of will, of I will sit, I will be here. But there's the other discipline of surrender. Yeah, do put your experiences. Hi, Karen. Nice to have you there.
Hi, Karen.
It'd be nice to hear how that was, even just for a few seconds for people. For me, there is just a little moment of, oh, where am I? Who am I? And then there's a sort of, allowing. Oh, Nick, you've vanished.
Camera's gone.
You just want to stay there, Karen. Yes. Allowing what is. The discipline of surrender comes to you. So there's willful discipline in which you can decide to surrender, but actual surrender, actually not doing, comes to you.
Which is a bit like what Cliff, you were saying before about this is a bigger thing.
Yeah. So any other comments about, I mean, it was barely
I would, as comments come in, I would say there's a bit of the if you build it, he will come thing. You know, in order for things to come to you, there has to be some preparation. Like Japanese culture is full of rituals of preparation. But then that's all you can do. You can only prepare, you can only make yourself open to whatever's going to be coming.
Yeah. So I'm actually not going to hang about with that, because of me remembering that I need more just be a pause on the brink of something, breath and space, and more if I stayed there. Yes, I don't know about you, but I also find it very powerful doing it with a group, even an online group.
And also notice, the chat becomes quite like poetry. And when you try to talk about this stuff, you have to get into a more poetic kind of language. And that's a good way to think about it, I think, the difference between poetry and prose.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Breathe by the universe. Oh, nice. So here are some thoughts from me on non-doing in touch, and I invite you guys just go through this. So I say, or I repeat really, that I wonder if, in fact, what a lot of the non-doing that we're talking about in touch work is really what some of the chat has been talking about, is giving a certain type of space, pausing, being considered, giving space to the client, having a quietness and a gentleness. And people talk about openness in the touch. And for me, it's okay to call that non-doing. I don't find it very accurate in the end, but I think that's fine. We need some way of talking about this kind of approach, which is just maybe a little bit like quieter, calmer, allowing things to happen in the way that so many people have talked about. This, for me, is it's a minimal technique, if you like. I mean, it's nonetheless a technique, like any other technique, for something to happen. You know, that it's got purpose about it. I'm allowing space for you to heal. I'm allowing space because that's the kind of medicine I'm offering. I mean, I invite you to comment. Maybe, you know, that's a bit controversial. I think that, as I've said there, it's achievable and valuable, but not non-doing.
Shah has a technique here of using language to sort of go beyond language, just saying internally, I surrender, I know nothing, and the peace flows in. Yeah, so that's a useful way of sidestepping language, use the language to take you into a place beyond the language. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have one more metaphor to do with music, Cliff, which is up your street.
We do. How are we doing that? Yes, I'll just go through this. Maybe non-doing is something a person, as somebody has already said this, is something actually you embody. That you actually are, a kind, you've embodied non-doing for whatever reason, through practice, through understanding, and that's what you're bringing. You're bringing yourself and your embodiment on non-doing to a situation that happens to be a person. And just bringing that experience that you have of non-doing, that understanding that you've embodied, is an act of a kind, but you're bringing a different space into the room.
I think that's really important to remember, that so much has already happened for somebody to be lying on the mat in front of you. Thousands of things have already happened for that simple relationship to exist. It's lovely just to sit with it.
Yeah. Over hundreds of years as well, Nick, when you were saying hundreds of years of preparation, thousands of years actually of preparation have gone behind that.
Yes, we are the culmination of humanity.
Yeah, true. And much of that discipline is orientated towards focusing on exactly the topic we've been just discussing for nearly an hour. The techniques involved amongst it, a lot of it is, within the culture of healing, China and Japan and so on. So it's worth bearing in mind, definitely.
Jill says there that most people, when it shows up, non-doing, people recognize it. We may not have words for it, and I've added that myself here, Jill. Oh, marvelous, 2 minds. So I put, maybe our clients experience something. That's what I find. They say there's something different here. There's something maybe even a little strange, but there's something different, and I feel a little different.
And I was making the point about academic work tends to send everything into the wrong direction. Absolutely. Yeah.
And the medicine is about doing something for people, not just to people, but helping them. And this can be interesting.
Just a time check here. I don't like to spoil the party, but we do like to finish on time. So,
Nick, do you want to say something about the piano?
Oh yes, just the 2 pianists I know, classical pianists. Reviewers have said the same thing about them both, and it's about how they make enormous efforts to understand what the composer was trying to say, and then they get out of the way. They don't impose anything of their own on that. They just play it. And I guess these reviewers notice that, comparing them to pianists who are trying to make points or sound clever or be original. It's a different experience. And I think that metaphor is very relevant for me in how I work with shiatsu. Is the person there, the music is in them, and I need to bring all my skills and patience and techniques to hear that music and to be present with it, and at the same time I need to just let it unfold. But my fingers are playing something, and they are listening to their own music, if you like, in an embodied way at least. That's a powerful metaphor for me. I don't know, Alice, what would you say? Or Cliff, you're a musician, for goodness sake.
Yeah, I don't know if I dare put this in at this stage, but let me just see how many slides are left and see so I don't preempt anything. But it just reminds me very much of the Strangard model, going back to teaching, and Rose was talking about teaching there. The 4 stages of learning. So you have unconscious incompetency, and then conscious competency, and then conscious incompetency. So first of all, you're a beginner's mind. You don't know what you don't know. Then you find out you don't know stuff and you can't do stuff. And then you consciously can do it. And then you go round the cycle again. And then you get to unconscious competency. And that's kind of a similar flavor to that. That's the same with the musicians. Like you're just it just flows because it's totally embodied in yourself. And then what you're talking about, Nick, I've heard said many times, especially with conductors, when they're conducting symphonies, they feel that they're almost channeling the composer. They get out of the way and they study. A bit like shiatsu, you study all this stuff, and in the end, it's a process of getting out of the way and letting all those thousands of years, letting the universe, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You get smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's something in that area of unconscious competency, something like that.
I do have Alice.
Well, I'm just going to really sort of start winding up because we've got so little time. But I mean, all this, I've put a few things there which you can have a look at. But all this, in a sense, this is technique. The framing is all technique.
Yeah.
And the non-doing is something other than that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's something that can be achieved.
Yeah.
And of course, the thing is that it takes a hell of a lot of doing to get to a point where you can undo, when you don't have to do anything, or when you're non-doing, or when you're even whatever it is that non-doing is that you can't say because it's doing.
Yes. So at this point, it was the only possibility was to put Winston in again. It's like, how do you represent this? So here is Winston jumping over anyway. So what is important to you really in your practice is negative doing relative to the art of touch. This is an open, we haven't got time to explore any further. Guided by what? Touching what? Doing what?
I've got a quote, if you have time for this one, from Leonard Cohen, who not that many people know. In the last years of his life, was a very serious Zen monk, studying as a Zen master. And this is an edited bit from his song, If It Be Your Will, and it goes like this. If it be, I'm not going to sing it, don't worry. If it be your will that I speak no more, and my voice be still as it was before, I will speak no more. I shall abide until I'm spoken for. If it be your will that a voice be true, from this broken hill I will sing to you. All your praises they shall ring, if it be your will to let me sing. And there's something in there about the doing and the non-doing. If it be your will, if it be the will of the cosmos. And it's
your will, thine be your will. This is also in Christianity, isn't it?
But you can almost bring that to the client. If it be your will to let me sing.
Going to share your slides now, which have those links on it. They are active links on the PDF, so if you download them, you'll get links directly into Alison Nick's website there. So
it's nice to end on a bit of Leonard. So that, I think, thank you for that, Nick. I think that's it. May well be. Maybe it would be nice to do a part 2.
Why not?
Further.
It would be almost completely silent.
That's right.
And thanks to everybody for all these great comments in the chat.
It's been, I feel humbled by the chat. I really do. The chat has been absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for everyone taking part. I hope you've really enjoyed it as much as I have. It's just so wonderful to be with both of you, Nick and Alice. I just enjoy it so much. It's just so great to just have discussions and to have experiences at this level. It's just absolutely beautiful, and it's the whole reason why New Energy works here, really, to create connections amongst teachers and to share and to just do cool stuff, or even not do them. So there's loads of hearts in the chat. I'm going to put one straight away. And then next week we've got Kat Westwood, who's on the chat at the moment. She's going to be doing another take on the whole thing, undoing the doing, with Scaravelli Yoga. So I really look forward to that. That'll be a very interesting contrasting session. And we'll get the chat downloaded, we'll distribute it, and let's maybe book in another session and can go maybe with a slightly different theme, and we can explore this even more, because it can be esoteric, but as we have experienced, I think as teachers, it's a very important issue. It is an important issue in terms of confidence, and and it's something that really does need to be addressed. And it's been a great pleasure to address it at this level. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's lovely.
So we'll see you next Tuesday for part 2. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you've got any friends who've missed it, tell them about it and to log on and get the recordings once they go up on YouTube, once Kat's done that. But for now, let's say goodbye and see you next week. Okay, thanks so much, the two of you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.